Agenda item number 11, Humane Borders.
Mr.
Supervisor Miller.
Regarding the Humane Borders supplying the water in the desert at a cost of $22,000 for the taxpayers, it's identified as reducing the need, and therefore the suggestion is a cost of aggressive search and rescue operations in the desert. In addition to the water, Humane Borders will purchase, deliver, and laminate maps and information brochures to be placed at border stations, printed in English and Spanish. I'd just like to note that in a report from CNN on Friday, August 16, 2013, federal agents did a nationwide sweep targeting the violent MS-13 street gang, and more than 263 people were arrested. Among those were 158 members of the MS-13 street gang. Special agents also seized 28 firearms, 10 kilos of marijuana, 123 grams of cocaine, and over 770 grams of heroin, and a large amount of cash. MS-13 is identified as one of the most dangerous transnational criminal gangs in the world. They operate chapters in 42 states across the country, according to the FBI. Among their criminal activities, drug trafficking across the border, murder, rape, and robbery. Last October, President Barack Obama's administration named the organization a transnational criminal enterprise with the goal of realizing millions of dollars in profits from drug and sex trafficking operations. Talk to the family of Brian Terry, who was murdered by those crossing our border illegally, and those responsible still have not been brought to justice. Agents on the border lay their lives down every day to protect us from gangs, human traffickers coming across our border. Yet we place water stations, informational brochures in the desert to aid these traffickers, among others, to help with their safe and swift passage on the highway to the United States. With the porous border, thousands of illegal aliens are brought in, many of whom end up in sex and/or labor enslavement scenarios, coerced into working in various service industries at lower pay than what we pay here in the country. By providing these water stations and map, we are aiding and abetting the lawbreakers, human traffickers, drug cartels, the MS-13 gangs entering this country illegally. Whether it's inadvertent, I'm sure, but that's happening. Those who enter our country illegally come here for numerous reasons, but the route they are taking to get here, many by paying a human drug trafficker to help them cross. Human and drug traffickers to help them cross. These poor people are abused. They are forced to carry drugs, raped, beaten, and often left for dead. Do you really believe the coyote, human drug trafficker, drug dealer is going to go back to find the poor soul who is dying of thirst a few hundred yards back once they reach the water stations? I have heard numerous arguments against the gas pipeline, stating that this will provide a highway for the illegal entrance into the United States. Yet these same people think it is a good thing to put these water stations in the desert, along with maps and other information. No one wants to see one human being die in the desert. Yet you are justifying this by the cost savings for aggressive search and rescue operations. You don't consider the cost to our society with these gangs operating in our streets in 42 states, murdering our citizens, dealing in drugs, and the horrific cost of human trafficking, especially among children. This cost far outweighs the costs of search and rescue operations in the desert. One thing that has always come to my attention is, why haven't we explored using something like the solar-powered stations that we have along the highways as an emergency beacon for those in distress to contact our Border Patrol? Then we know who is coming into the country. Then we know what they are doing here. And most importantly, we need more security on our border. I just heard Sheriff Paul Babu testify to this firsthand. Enforcement works. Enforcement would stop the flow of the drug traffickers and human traffickers through the desert, and our monies are more wisely spent there. With that said, I make a motion to deny funding Humane Borders for this water in the desert.
Is there a second? Hearing none, motion dies for lack of a second.
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Elias.
I can appreciate Supervisor Miller's sentiments, but there's no evidence that any of those murderous gangs have taken advantage of humane borders, placing this water out there in the desert. And we do need to find a resolution to the immigration issues that are plaguing this nation and the migration phenomena that has affected us, especially here in Arizona. There is some relevance to an argument to be made about the cost effectiveness of search and rescue, but there's also, for me, and I admit this is only Richard's opinion, that as people of faith, we have a moral obligation to try and save people's lives who make that dangerous trek into the desert. And we have to act in a humanitarian way rather than blindly attacking these people who want so much to improve their lives and have an opportunity to live here in America. And our immigration system is so broken that they are unable to come here legally. It's an unfortunate situation, but in order to reduce the number of people who die out there in the desert, I thank Humane Borders for what they've been able to do throughout their history, and I'm proud to support them. And I think they're a key part of our community, and they speak loudly about the sensibilities of people here in Tucson and Pima County, and the fact that we understand that we live in the borderlands and that there is a humanitarian aspect to all of that that we should respect as people of faith. With that, I'm going to move item 11, Humane Borders, and contract amount $22,500.
Mr. Chairman?
Second.
Okay, there's motion and second. Supervisor Miller.
I'd just like to respond to that I am a person of faith, and I'd like to point out that there is no evidence that these people are not using these water stations. So no one can prove that they're not using them, and I assume that they probably are. But at the end of the day, we have to think about the cost to the lives that are here in this country and the poor people crossing who are abused, as I said. Those people are relying upon this criminal enterprise to help them get across the country, and that was my point. No one wants to see anyone die in the desert, but I think there's a better solution, and I agree with Richard that we need to work on this and we need to come to a solution. Thank you.
As I said, I understand Supervisor Miller's sentiment, and I don't think that her comments are coming from an angry, negative, bad place. But I wanted to make sure folks understand that there's a very different perspective on this issue on this Board of Supervisors as well.
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Brown.
I seconded the motion, so obviously I'm going to support it. And I, again, appreciate the comments made by Supervisor Miller. I think she might find it instructive to, at some point, maybe take a tour with Humane Borders to see what they actually do. I did. I was impressed with what they did, and therefore I am comfortable supporting this item.
All right, you do have two speakers. I'm going to go ahead and call them up. I'm going to ask each of you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. There's a timer here. When it flashes red, your 3 minutes are up. It'll flash yellow at a minute left. So let me call Dinah Bear. Please come up, identify yourself for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Valadez, honorable supervisors, and Mr. Huckleberry, also honorable. My name is Dinah Bear. I chair Humane Borders, a faith-based charitable organization dedicated to saving lives in the borderlands. We are grateful for the opportunity to come before you this morning and renew our request for county assistance to maintain a system of water stations in southern Arizona. It has been a tough and hot summer. It's not over yet. All of our water stations are on public lands, are under government permit, and of course the stations on private lands are there with private landowner permission, but that hasn't stopped some people who are concerned about our mission and object to it from vandalizing both our trucks and our water stations. Our trucks themselves are aging, and in the repair shop a great deal. We're bringing a truck back from Ajo this morning. At the same time, the Border Patrol has been consulting with us throughout the summer about effective messaging in Central and South Mexico and Central America to deter people from coming in the first place. We do have maps showing how many days it is from particular points into Tucson and Phoenix and other places in Arizona. The Border Patrol does also. That is actually an attempt to persuade people to give them the truth about how long it takes to walk from the border to these locations. We know for a fact that migrants are told that it's 45 minutes to Tucson or Phoenix, or even in one case, 45 minutes to New York City from the border. The people that founded our organization thought this situation would only last a year or two. Very regrettably, they were wrong. Even though the number of apprehensions has dropped dramatically over the past couple of years, the rate of death, the number of deaths has remained steady. As the deaths rise in South Texas, we are also being asked for guidance. Both Humane Borders and other organizations are being asked for guidance. Regrettably, Southern Arizona has the most experience in America with migrant deaths. This spring, we were able to launch an interactive website in partnership with the county's medical examiner's office that provides layers of information about verified migrant deaths in Southern Arizona, and that has been useful information to the medical examiner's office, researchers, public, and the families of missing loved ones. We very much would like to get out of this business. There is no question about it. It's very hard to prove statistically exactly who uses the stations and how many lives it saves. We do know, for an example, that the life of an 11-year-old girl was saved when she was separated from her group and she remembered where the station was and went back to that. And we have other anecdotal examples. But it is a tragic situation, and I think we all agree that we need to fix this. The federal government needs to fix this situation. In the meantime, we need to take care of the people that are dying in our backyard. Personally, I'm grateful to live in a county that addresses this issue, and on behalf of Humane Borders, I ask that you approve the contract.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? All right, hearing none, the next speaker will be Jerry Payton. Mr. Payton, please come up, identify yourself for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Jerry Payton. My address is 2382 East Precious Yard Court, and that's in Oro Valley. I'm the founder and executive director of Sold No More, formerly Streetlight Tucson. We're an anti-trafficking NGO here. I'm also the organizing head of the Southern Arizona Human Trafficking Task Force. I brought together law enforcement personnel from every municipal, federal, state, a law enforcement agency here, as well as all 3 prosecutors' offices. And it was Supervisor Miller who suggested that I make these comments during this item on the agenda, although I'm not arguing for or against the funding of the water stations, but the need for better anti-trafficking laws. The report was released yesterday, published in Phoenix from Polaris Project. Arizona once again ties for the 3rd worst human trafficking laws in the country. We are not doing enough. If you talk to people who work on the border, as I do, because I head up the task force, the women who come across, who are smuggled across, the coyotes don't just take money to smuggle them, they then collect money from the men who come down in pickup trucks to rape them en masse. I've seen the pictures of the rape trees with the women's undergarments hanging down along the borders. That's welcome to America. What was a human smuggling becomes a human trafficking. They come across the border and they're being sold before they even get to Tucson. Because we don't have laws, including tough enough laws in Pima County, we're not addressing what's happening to these people. And one reason is we don't call it human trafficking. We've had 6 cases this year already in Pima County of child sex trafficking, not one of which has been labeled legally as child sex trafficking. It's been labeled as pandering, child prostitution. So we don't have a child sex trafficking problem here. But we are arresting juvenile victims, and they have a record as prostitutes. We do not have safe harbor laws here. Earlier this year, I was in Pima County Juvenile Court speaking on behalf of a 16-year-old who was on trial as a felon for resisting arrest. She was resisting arrest because she was dropped off at a hotel after having been sold. And no one in the court mentioned the fact that she's being sold by a 35-year-old man, had been raped when she was 15 and 16 by adult men. She was about to become a convicted felon. But because I was able to explain to the court what had happened to her, they dropped all the felony charges. But here's where the county comes in. Afterwards, the prosecuting attorney, I've had great work with the Pima County Prosecutor's Office, came out to me and thanked me for killing her case. She said, we don't want to convict 16-year-olds as felons when they're trafficking victims. We need to change the process here, the trafficking laws and process for these victims, so they don't go to court and become convicted. So I would ask you to, on a future agenda, address the specific child sex trafficking and human trafficking issues here in Pima County, especially how they're being handled in the courts and in the Pima County Sheriff's Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payton. Any questions?
I just want to thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Elias.
Before we vote, I would just comment that the gentleman makes a good point, and certainly if crossing the border is the first crime in all of this mess that we have related to this migration phenomena, then it's true that sexual assault is the second crime that happens along the border. And we've known this for years. This is not a surprise. This is one of the more horrible aspects of why we need to resolve the issue related to immigration in our country. But while we're saying that, I would also add that our forensic science office has done an excellent job and really needs to be the model for the entire border region as to how to deal with these deaths that take place in the desert. And the humanitarian aid that's placed out in the desert by Humane Borders should be a model also. And I think that it's incumbent on all of us to contact our congresspeople and let them know, out of the hundreds of billions of dollars being included in the current immigration bill, several billion of those dollars should be spent on humanitarian aid. That's border security.
Any other comments? Hearing none, the motion before us is on the approval of item number 11. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, please signify by saying nay.
No.
By your vote of 3 to 1, motion carries.